Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, your home for Pittsburgh Penguins news and analysis. You can find us on YouTube at Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Make sure that you like, share, subscribe over there. It really is the best way to support us here on this channel, or you can find us anywhere you get your podcast from. And same thing over there. If you're on Spotify, click the follow button. If you're on Apple Podcasts, make sure you take a slap shot to that subscribe button. It really does show us that you're here to support us, and it goes a long way in supporting us both on our audio and on our video platforms. But season 7 rolls on here with our first discussion of Sidney Crosby. That's how we're going to kick things off, because he's aiming to just add on to his historic streaks. Everything about Sidney Crosby at this point is about just climbing leaderboards, because it seems like every single season he is just going to climb to the absolute tippy top of a different leaderboard, and he has a chance to do that again in 2025-26. So we'll lead off the show with our first discussion of season 7, talking about Sidney Crosby, and then we have a little treat from our friends over at the Sota Pod, where they had a discussion with new Penguins forward Justin Brazeau. We'll get to learn a little bit more about the newest Penguins bottom sixer, what makes him tick, what his welcome to the NHL moment was, and just a little bit more about the new guy before he steps foot on the ice in Cranberry here in just a couple of weeks. And then we'll close things out with a couple rule changes from this new CBA that could take effect this season. And one of them, if implemented, could seriously change and alter the trajectory of the Pittsburgh Penguins' top prospect. All that and more on today's episode of the Tip of the Ice-Burgh. But like I mentioned, we're going to kick things off by talking about, of course, Sidney Crosby. It's a slight surprise that when we kicked off season 7 of the Tip of the Ice-Burgh last week, we really didn't talk a whole heck of a lot about Sidney Crosby, because as of right now, and as of with most times when we get into September, there's no drama surrounding Sidney Crosby. The only question for him is, which leaderboards can he climb up this year? Which historic streaks is he going to be able to either create, or is he going to be able to extend? And that's where I want to go with this one, because there's two big ones. One of them, I think, is really the discussion that we should be having about expectations for Sidney Crosby and a streak that we'd like to see him extend. We'll get to that in just a minute or so. But he's gearing up for year 21 as a member of the Pittsburgh Penguins organization. The team expectations going into the season, they might be the lowest that they've ever been, right? Up until a couple of years ago, the expectation was Stanley Cup or bust. And that was from the second he stepped foot in this city until about 2024. And at that point, you looked at the team around him and you just said, listen, we'd like to continue to heap these expectations of winning Stanley Cups, winning championships, winning divisions, winning playoff series. You'd love to keep that as the standard, but the team around him is just such that it doesn't seem to be realistic. So you have to readjust your expectations for the Penguins as a team. They've missed out on the playoffs for 3 consecutive seasons. And as I talked about briefly last episode, they are a team that Elliot Friedman of Sportsnet routinely this summer said they are the only one in the NHL not actively trying to get better. That doesn't mean they were trying to get worse. It just means in his eyes, they weren't actively trying to get better. So team expectations are low. But it's Sidney Crosby. So when you look at the individual expectations, for him, it doesn't really matter. He's a team guy. But for everybody on the outside looking in, when you look at Sidney Crosby, when you preview the season for the Penguins, the expectations from player to player may vary, but the ones on Sidney Crosby remain sky high. And that includes maintaining not one, but a pair of very historic streaks that he currently has rolling in his favor. The one is something that we've been following along with every single season until he set the NHL record for it last year, and that was the point per game streak that he has going throughout his entire career. From the age of 18 to the age of 37, each year in between that, 20 straight seasons, Sidney Crosby had at least a point per game in each and every season that he participated in. Like I mentioned, he set the NHL record for that last season with his 20th straight, surpassing, of course, 99 Wayne Gretzky. So can he do that again this year? That is step number one when it comes to these two streaks. Can he hit that point per game? Now, of course, it'd be lovely to see him play all 82. And if he does so, point per game would be the 82 point mark. If it's less that he plays, then it's less that he needs to go to maintain this streak. But let's say he does the full 82, or at the very least scores 82 points, which would notch him his 21st point per game season no matter what. That 82 points would tie him with Adam Oates for the most points by a 38-year-old in NHL history. The bar is starting to decline a little bit as Sidney Crosby gets a little bit older. A couple years ago, it was, 100 points in Joe Sakic. I think that was last year. At 37, it's 100-point plateau. It's Joe Sakic. That is the record. He wasn't able to quite get there. He finished with 91 points last year. But this year, at the age of 38, that goal, that record that he could go out there and get is 82 points, something that he has reached multiple times in his career. And as we'll talk about now, he's reached that and surpassed that for 3 consecutive seasons. That's the second historic streak that he needs to continue on. Can Sidney Crosby reach the 90-point plateau again? Now, of course, reaching the 90-point plateau this season in and of itself is not a streak that etches him in NHL history alone. But what it is something that continues a personal streak for Sidney Crosby. We mentioned this after the season last year. Once Sidney Crosby reached the 90-point plateau, he finished with 91 in the 2024-25 season. It was the first time in his entire career that Sidney Crosby had reached 90 points or more in 3 consecutive seasons. It feels wrong to say. Saying it out loud, it doesn't sound like an accurate stat, but it is. Now, part of that is due to the injuries that he suffered in his early portions of his career. He didn't play a lot of games. Not only that, you had the lockout in the 2012-13 season that shortened the season. He only played in, 36 games that year? So there have been various reasons that have kept him from accomplishing a feat of 90 plus for 3 consecutive. But in the age 35, 36, and 37-year-old seasons, he was able to stay healthy for the most part. He was able to stay on the ice, and he was able to continue producing at a very high level. If you look at the points on the screen right now, 93 points 3 seasons ago. Then he beat it by 1, 94 points 2 seasons ago. And last year, of course, he dropped off a little bit. A 3-point regression, 91 points in the 2024-25 season. So he looks to extend that career best streak to 4 seasons again this year. The question is, can he get there? Can he reach the 90-point plateau once again? I'm going to start this off by simply saying I'm not going to be the one that bets against him. And I'd venture to guess most people listening to this podcast are not going to bet against Sidney Crosby either. I understand that what he has around him isn't great. It certainly isn't 2016, 2017, 2018 version of the Pittsburgh Penguins. But what he does have, at least to start the season, are both of his line mates back. Brian Rust and Rickard Rakell. We talked about that in last week's episode of the Tip of the Ice-Burgh. If you want to hear my thoughts on the fact that those two plus Erik Karlsson remain on this roster and how surprising that is to me and how I see that playing out, you can go back and listen to the Season 7 premiere. But on this episode, we look at this as a positive for Sidney Crosby and something that helps lead me to the fact and the belief that he's going to be able to replicate his performance over the last 3 seasons in 2025-26. He has Rust and Rakell along his wings, and those 3 together played, first of all, a heck of a lot last year. And secondly, they were one of the top forward lines in all of hockey. Not just, hey, they were one of the best in the Metro. Hey, they were certainly the best on the Penguins, but they were one of the best trios in the entire NHL last season. And nothing tells me that that's going to change this year if they're able to play together for an extended period of time. Now, that is likely the line that I would imagine starts on October was it 7th or 9th, whatever it is, that starts on the 7th, I believe, at Madison Square Garden. But even behind Rust and Raquel, there's two guys that could get opportunities on Crosby's wing that I'm very high on going into this season. Two talented young wingers that are chomping at the bit to prove that they are going to be part of the solution going forward in Pittsburgh. And that's Rutger McGroarty, whose NHL tryout at the end of last year was cut short due to a leg injury. And there's Ville Koivunen, who was able to finish out the season at the NHL level and was able to be impressive every single night. So you have Rust and Raquel to start, which, if they're his line mates, once again, I would imagine they're going to be one of the best lines in hockey. And even if one of them are traded, or both of them are traded, you have a couple of young wingers that I think are going to help push him over that 90-point plateau. Not to mention, there is another factor that plays into Sidney Crosby's season when you're trying to forecast what we're going to get from 87 in the 2025-26 season. You cannot do so without talking about the elephant in the room, and that is Milan in February. That is the Olympics. For the first time in over a decade, Sidney Crosby gets to don the Team Canada sweater in an Olympic Games. Yes, he was able to do it at the World Championships. That one didn't end too well. He was able to do it at the Four Nations Face-Off. That one ended exactly how you would expect, with Sidney Crosby getting a gold medal. But what it also did after the Four Nations was energize Sidney Crosby. There are few human beings that can change their entire physical being because of the fact that they get to play for their country. Sidney Crosby, after winning gold, was a different animal in the 2024-25 season. We've been talking about, well, he finished with 91 points. That's a pretty good season. But let's not forget, Sidney Crosby had 0 goals in his first 10 games last year. He got off to, for him, a slow start. For Sidney Crosby's level and the expectations that we always have on Crosby and the expectations that he has on himself, he had a relatively slow start. Before the Four Nations Face-Off tournament, Sidney Crosby had 58 points in 55 games, which is not bad. It's pretty good, especially considering the team that he had around him. It's an 86-point pace, though, which, as we all know, is slightly under expectation for Sidney Crosby in an 82-game season. However, after he won gold, after he played in the Four Nations with an injured wrist, mind you, after that, all he did was come back to Pittsburgh and put up 33 points in the final 25 games of a season in which was lost with 20 of those games to go. The Penguins were far out of playoff contention, and yet Sidney Crosby continued to go out there and just put up a measly 108-point pace over more than a quarter of a season. That's what the Olympics, that's what playing for Team Canada does for Sidney Crosby. That's the juice that it brings out of one of the greatest of all time. And we're going to get to see that again this year. So if the question is, will he, won't he reach 90 points? I started this conversation by saying I'm not betting against him for sure. I'm ending this conversation by saying that I am betting for him to hit the 90-point plateau, no matter what sportsbook there is. And again, I'll say bet responsibly. We don't have a sponsor that's a sportsbook, but I'm just going to say bet responsibly. It's your money. You do what you want with it. But my money is going on Sidney Crosby over on almost everything this year. Maybe not team wins for the Penguins, but individually, anytime we're going to have a Crosby discussion going into the year, I have full faith that in year 21, at 38 years old, he's going to hit a point per game once again to continue to create separation between himself and the great one, Wayne Gretzky. I think he's going to catch Adam Oates with at least 82 points for the most points by a 38-year-old in the NHL. And I do believe that for the first time in his career, Sidney Crosby will finish with 90-plus points in 4 consecutive seasons. It's going to be a fun year. I'm excited to see what we get to see out of number 87. Now, at the beginning of the show, I mentioned, and as you can see on the bottom ticker here, that we are going to learn a little bit more about Pittsburgh Penguins forward Justin Brazeau, and that comes courtesy of our friends over at the Sota Pod and Fellowship of the Rink. Shout out to Joe Smith, who sat down and had a conversation with new Penguins forward Justin Brazeau. Have a listen.
Were you surprised you weren't drafted, or like where was the kind of the feel of that at time?
Yeah, I mean, the drafted thing, I don't think I was necessarily too surprised with. Obviously, I played my draft year was my first year in the OHL, and I think I had 12 points or whatever it was. So I ended up going to Detroit's camp, didn't get drafted, didn't really expect to get drafted. Like, I had never really heard of anything until kind of towards the end of the year, and I got on like one draft, like a position or something. The next year, I thought there was a slight chance. I think I had 20 goals my 18-year-old year, 40 points or something. So I thought there may have been a chance. And then I never got drafted. I never went to like a whatever they call it, development
prospect camp, development camp. Yeah.
I ended up going to like the prospect tournament at the end of the year to like fill a roster. But so that was like the only year I kind of thought I was maybe going to get drafted. But no, I never really, like I said, I never really had expectations of the draft just because I knew I was kind of a little later getting going. And my third year in the OHL, I obviously had a good year. I went to San Jose's camp. I thought there was potentially a chance of something there. But then they told me to go back and just have a good year. And that year was kind of I thought I had earned, potentially an NHL contract at that point from what I had done. But obviously it didn't work out. And, I wouldn't change kind of how I got here at all, though.
And do you have is it especially gratifying considering the way you got here? Like, I think you talk to guys who played in the coast and stuff like that and kind of know what it's like to bounce around. Like, does it give you kind of that satisfaction of like, hey, this is how I got here?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's, I don't think I would change anything about kind of how I got here. Obviously every road is different. But yeah, I think everything kind of leads towards where you get to. Like, I mean, I feel like I can handle not criticism, but the ebbs and flows of a season a little better now because I'm so used to, being down there, being up, being everywhere. But yeah, no, I definitely feel a kind of a sense of, accomplishment being able to stick with it for as long as I did. Obviously I had I played, I think 80 games down in the East Coast League. So I was, I stuck with it. I was sent down 2 different times. And then after, the COVID year in Toronto, I wasn't sure. I was honestly so after my second year in Toronto, I had committed to the University of Toronto. And I was about a week away from I started to pick my courses and kind of figure out, where I was going to live down there and go to school. And then Providence called me kind of a week before I was kind of ready to go down and offered me a deal. And I knew I could play here. I knew I never lost that belief that I could make the NHL. But obviously it's tough when you kind of bouncing around down there and you're like, I don't know if I'll ever get my chance. So I knew I could play, and then Providence gave me the call and gave me a contract. And I said, what's one more year going to do? I'd already lost my OHL package at that point, and I would have had a red shirt for a year. So I decided to go with it. And obviously I'm pretty happy I did.
What were you going to study, or what was going to be your backup plan, or what would you think you would have done if you didn't?
Yeah, I was kind of going back and forth between like the business program there or kinesiology. I wasn't really sure. It was kind of like that weird year where we didn't finish up till a little bit later because we didn't start till like February or whatever it was. And then I kind of waited about a month or two to see if I'd get anything. And I'd gotten 2 other offers in the American League, but they were basically just ECHL offers. And I told my agent, I don't want to sign just a straight ECHL deal. So I was kind of I wasn't 100% sure. I just knew I was going to kind of get down to Toronto and figure it out from there. Basically, I was talking to the coach, he's like, just get down here and we'll figure it out. But yeah, it was probably between those 2.
And then when you got to Providence, obviously you took off from there. Like, was there a certain kind of turning point for you, or like a confidence building moment to where like you kind of knew that there was going to be no more kind of going down in that respect?
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky. The coaches in Providence were awesome for me. Ryan Mujna is somebody that, I owe a lot to in my career. Him and his assistants down there to be able to kind of stick with me and believe in me and trust in me was awesome. Obviously, when I first got to Prov, I probably wasn't in the best shape ready to play hockey because I honestly thought that summer, it was kind of like well, I'm not going to play hockey for the next year and a half because I couldn't play my first year at school. So I wasn't probably training as hard as a professional hockey player should be. So that's basically why I got sent down. And when I got called up, they basically just said, like, play your game. We believe in you. And we know you guys, you be a good player here. So I owe a lot to them. I think that was the biggest thing for me. Just like, I remember even in Toronto, like my second year, I kind of like, I knew I could play, but I knew that maybe the situation I was in, they didn't quite see me sticking. So I think just that confidence from a coaching staff, like I can go out and play my game. And if I make little mistakes, it's not going to be like I get back to the bench and I'm sent back down again. You know what I mean? Just that confidence of knowing that I'm going to get my next shift as long as I keep trying to work hard and do the best that I can. So I owe a lot to those guys down there.
What's the most vivid memory from the day of your NHL debut? Like, obviously, the end result, we all know what happened. He's scoring a goal, but like, what was the overall emotions of the day? And kind of, was it a surprise? Did you kind of see it coming? And like, kind of how did that play out?
Yeah, no, that was one of the craziest weekends of my life. I mean, I think so. My debut was on a Monday in Boston. We had played the Friday night in Providence, and there was rumblings that like they were trying to shake some stuff up because I think they were struggling. Like, they obviously had a good team, but their fourth line was kind of getting struggling a little bit. And I remember the Friday night, I think the whole front office from the Bruins was at the game. So I ended up playing pretty well. And then Saturday night, because we were supposed to play on Sunday in Prov at like 3:00. And normally every night before a game, like the lineup will get sent out. And there'll be a schedule so guys know when to come in. And like basically they just put in like everybody show up to the rink ready to play. Like, we're not sure what the lineup's going to be. So people were kind of like, something's off. Like, something's a little weird. And I remember I showed up to the rink and I was kind of we're getting ready for the game in the shower. And like our coach, like Mujino, came in and was just kind of like, hey, come see me in my office for 5 minutes. And I was like, oh, that's like weird. Cause at the like, I've got an American League contract. Like, if anybody's going to get called up, I was like, it's not going to be me because I'd have to sign a deal. But he pulled me in and he basically just said, like, Sweens is coming down to, they're going to offer you a contract. And I think the plan is to play tomorrow. So it was kind of one of those things where I signed my contract in the first and second period, intermission in Providence. And then kind of halfway through the second period, I packed up my bag. I went in and popped my head in between the second intermission and said, good luck to them for the third period. And I headed up to Boston, went to a hotel and played the next morning at 1. So it's kind of crazy. And, the timing worked out really well. My sister had never been a Prov in my 3 years that I was there. So she was on her reading week back home. So she flew in. I picked her up on a Saturday in Boston. And so she ended up being there already. So she was able to kind of watch my first game. My parents flew in. So it was a crazy weekend, but it was pretty special.
And like to have the goal too, right? Something you'll remember for the rest of your life.
Definitely a pretty cool moment.
And you feel like you kind of found your identity then at that point, like when you started to get a chance to play in Boston, you needed some help on the fourth line, but kind of did you kind of feel like I know you've been a scorer for a lot of your previous junior career, but you kind of identify what kind of way would be successful for you at this level?
Yeah, I mean, when I signed too, like I remember Sween, like that was the biggest thing. He's like, we're gonna bring you up and call you up, and we don't want you to change a single thing about your game. Like, you might not score as much or create quite as much as you do in the American League, but we don't want you to change the way you play. Like, I feel like the way I play now is kind of the way I've always played. Obviously, in the American League, you get a little bit more time and space sometimes, or opportunity on like power plays and just playing more minutes to put up points. But I was just kind of told, like, just play the way you play. And I think, I can bring that to a line where I don't necessarily play as super flashy or anything, but I feel like I do what I'm supposed to do well, and, getting in on forechecks and trying to create pucks stalled up and, get into the net and stuff like that.
Shout out once again to Joe Smith and Fellowship of the Rink for sending over that interview that they had with Justin Brazeau. Enjoyed listening to it. Enjoyed getting to know a little bit more about one of these new Penguins bottom six forwards. There's a lot of fresh faces coming to Cranberry in a couple weeks, getting ready for their first season as Pittsburgh Penguins, and Brazeau being kind of one of the more questionable ones. What are you going to get, really? Because you talk about Matt Dumbas of the world. You've seen Matt Dumba. You talk about the Connor Cliftons of the world. You've seen a lot of Connor Clifton playing with the Buffalo Sabres and playing with the Boston Bruins. You talk about Parker Wotherspoon, same thing. But Justin Brazeau, a guy that didn't know much about him. So getting to know a little bit more about how he views his game, how he came up in the NHL is certainly appreciated. So what are Pens fans getting in Justin Brazeau? What did I take away from that conversation from Fellowship of the Rink? Man, more physicality in the bottom six. It is the pillar of what Kyle Dubas wanted to bring to the organization this summer. They don't want to be pushovers anymore. They don't want to be easy to play against. So I think that you look at Justin Brazeau, and it sounds like somebody who knows his role. And I understand that that might come off as a negative thing, but listen, he knows he's not going to go out there and score 20 goals a season. If he does, that's a great surprise. But he knows that he's there to do a job. And I'm excited to see him do that job as a member of this kind of restructured, refigured Penguins bottom six. He's going to bring that physicality. And I think all in all, the Penguins are going to be a team that battles a little bit more this season, that has a little bit more fight in them. And that's something that a lot of fans mentioned last year that they were pretty upset about, that there were times that the Penguins just looked like a dejected bunch that really didn't want to be there. It seems as if a lot of these players that came in, Brazeau included, are going to bring a little bit of a different flavor of that. They're not going to be dejected. They're not going to feel bad about themselves. They're not going to just sit there and get pushed around. And that's something that I think a lot of people are excited to see. It's a change of pace from what we've seen over the past couple of seasons from the Penguins organization. So I'm excited about Brazeau. And once again, a quick thank you goes out to Joe Smith at Fellowship of the Rink, as well as State of Hoppy, who sent that over here, friend of the show. If you want to check out the entire interview with Justin Brazeau, we have it linked in the description below, both the audio and the video platforms, or you can search the Sota Pod on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcasts from. Let's finish off this episode by talking about a couple rule changes. And I know that sometimes it can get a little bit boring just talking about the CBA contract, what the new rule changes are, when they take effect. But there's one that if it takes effect a year early, as with some of these other rules from the CBA, it's going to seriously affect, or potentially seriously affect, if the Penguins choose to utilize it, one of, if not their top prospect in the minor leagues right now. Now, a couple months ago, the NHL and the NHL Players Association surprised everybody whenever they agreed to a CBA extension very, very early. You know, labor peace is not something that hockey fans are used to, especially when it's a year out from the the current contract coming to an end. But the NHL, the NHLPA, they came to an agreement and everybody was happy. It's supposed to take effect on September of 2026, but as we've learned in the past week, some rules are going to be rolled out this season. Some of those rules include a salary cap in the playoffs. So if you are somebody that was very upset about Nikita Kucherov and the over $18 million over the salary cap Tampa Bay Lightning a few years back, that's not going to happen anymore. If you're somebody that gets very upset about the Vegas Golden Knights letting Mark Stone sit on a beach somewhere, he's not doing that. He's actually rehabbing an injury. But Mark Stone not playing in the regular season, then coming back in game 82 or the first game of the playoffs, that's going to be harder for that to happen because there is going to be a playoff salary cap in the next iteration of the Stanley Cup playoffs in 2026. Not only that, but there's a couple other rules that have slid through and will take effect this year, including no double retaining on trades, which is going to make some things interesting around the deadline. Small things like there can be no team enforced dress codes. I don't know about you, but I enjoy the fact that NHL players are dressed up, coming off the bus on the road, getting to their home ice. I think it looks cool. And some players, Chris Letang, are still going to take full advantage of dressing up and looking nice coming to the rink. I think it just adds something to the NHL. But hey, listen, do what you want. It doesn't really matter. I'm sure some of these guys are still going to show up and show out when it comes to the walk-ins. Not something that actually affects the game. But there is a big one that it hasn't been confirmed that it's taking place this year, at least as of this recording. But one very major one would be that NHL organizations would be allowed to play one 19-year-old at the AHL level. And that's a big deal because before this rule change, you had to be 20 years of age or had competed in 4 complete CHL seasons to be able to move up to the American Hockey League. Otherwise, it would have had to be NHL or back to juniors, sliding that entry-level contract. And the reason that this caught my eye, the reason that I think this is a very, very interesting ruling to follow with is because it directly affects the Penguins' top prospect, Harrison Brunicke. Brunicke was recently ranked the number 1 prospect in the Penguins pool by The Athletic a couple weeks ago when they named the Penguins the 19th best prospect system in all of hockey, and Harrison Brunicke was leading the way there. But Brunicke dang near made the NHL last season at 18 years old. He got drafted, he came to Pittsburgh, and he impressed every single person that laid eyes on him throughout that training camp last season. And he almost made the team, if even for that 9-game tryout sample size before getting sent back to juniors. He was very close to making the team. In fact, if Erik Karlsson, who was dealing with an injury and really didn't participate at all in training camp, would have been injured to start the season, missed a week or so, it would have been, not probably, it would have been Harrison Brunicke who took his spot for those couple of games. So he was that good at 18. Now, a year later, after dealing with a little bit of adversity, being injured throughout a large portion of his season last year in the WHL, forcing him to miss the opportunity to play in World Juniors for Team Canada, he was able to put some things together. He closed out the season playing very good hockey. He came over to the AHL to get a cup of coffee with the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins, and guess what? He played very good hockey there as well. He came to the rookie development camp this summer. You know what? He played very good hockey there. Every time this kid has been put in front of Penguins fans' eyeballs, he has excelled. He has impressed. He has proven that he is mature beyond his years, specifically in his own zone. So that brings us to this season. If this rule is taken into place, maybe it is the perfect opportunity to stow Harrison Brunicke at the Wilkes-Barre Scranton level. It's the perfect opportunity for him to actually play on the first year of that 3-year ELC. It's the perfect opportunity for him to take that next step and really immerse himself in professional hockey. Coming into the camp, making the NHL squad is going to be difficult. There's just a lot in front of the kid. Erik Karlsson is still on the right side. Chris Letang is still on the right side. Matt Dumba is still on the right side. Connor Clifton is still on the right side. And even if, I've seen this thrown around a couple times, even if one of those 4 end up moving to the left side, there's still 3 NHL caliber defensemen that are likely going to get ice time over Harrison Brunicke on the right side. And you're not going to keep him at the NHL level to put him up in the press box and make him be a healthy scratch. So it's going to be very hard for him to make the team out of camp. Now, is it impossible? No. I'd imagine the door is slightly ajar, especially with Erik Karlsson's situation being as up in the air as humanly possible. I would imagine the door is slightly ajar for Harrison Brunicke, but more than likely, his destination, if this rule change doesn't go through, is back to the WHL, which is unfortunate. There are some that believe, yeah, he could use a little bit of seasoning, but I don't think it's a whole year. I don't think it is an entire season that he needs down at the WHL level. Personally, from what I've seen, I think that he could use that jump to play against AHL level talent, to play against professionals. Now, I think short term, he's likely going to show out again. That's the only thing he's been able to do in Pittsburgh is be impressive, like I mentioned. And with the current rules, it would be, hey, you either make the team or you go back to the WHL. But with this new rule, I'd love to see him get the opportunity to start the season at the AHL level, even at 19 years old. Because while at the beginning of the season, he might, run into some speed bumps. He might have a couple of issues acclimating to the pace of play, acclimating to the physicality of professional hockey. It's something that I think would help move his progression faster than putting him back at the WHL for a full year. Because while he might have some edges to smooth out in his game, I feel like if he goes back to juniors, you're running the risk of him plateauing halfway through the year and then having to be there the rest of the year. If you bring him to the AHL, and utilize this rule, you get him in a position where he's playing with some of the top prospects in your entire system, guys that you're hoping he grows chemistry with, guys that you're hoping he joins as that next core of Pittsburgh Penguins. Guys like Tristan Brazeau, guys like Owen Pickering if he starts the season down there, guys like Emil Pianiniemi, who's going to be starting the season at the AHL level, guys like Sergei Murashov at the AHL level. Getting the opportunity for him to come and start at that level, I think is a positive. And if the NHL pushes this rule through as one of the few rules that are going to be rolled out a year in advance, I think the Penguins need to take advantage. And I think they need to take advantage by propelling their top prospect into a uncharted territory that I feel he is uniquely qualified to handle. I do. And it's the same thing as when you look at Rucker McGroarty last year. A lot of people said, yeah, maybe he's close to NHL ready. Then he started the AHL season and it was rough. Why? Because he was making the jump to playing against men. He was making the jump to playing professional hockey. But guess what? By the end of the season, he was one of the best, if not the best player on that Wilkes-Barre Scranton team. And it was undeniable that he was ready to move up to the NHL. If you put Brunicke in the same situation this year, I think it might garner the same results. And I think it could significantly expedite his maturation. Now, part of this is you want to make sure you get it right. It's not all about getting there first. It's about getting there with the right player at the right level whenever he is ready. And Jason Spezza has mentioned that on multiple occasions. It's not about getting them up here quickly. It's about getting them up here when they're ready. But I think moving Brunicke to the AHL, if that door opens, it's a door the Penguins should explore. Let me know in the comment section. Do you agree with me? Do you think it's a little bit too much too fast? If this rule goes through, would you utilize it to pull Harrison Brunicke up and let him be that 119-year-old that can be stowed at the American Hockey League level? But that's going to do it for this episode of The Tip of the Iceberg. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this one. And once again, I cannot continue to thank these guys enough. Joe Smith, State of Hoppy, all the guys over at the Sota Pod. Appreciate you sending over that conversation you had with new Penguins forward Justin Brazeau. But that's going to do it for this one. We'll see you guys next time.